Today's story is so forbidden it will leave you breathless, set deep in the unforgiving American West, where dust, blood, and fate collide beneath endless skies. It's a land where love can be a death sentence, and one wrong choice can ignite a war between worlds. This story begins with a single act of kindness, small, almost invisible, yet powerful enough to change the destiny of two people forever. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun hovered low over the Arizona territory, spilling copper and fire across the red stone. This was a country that allowed no softness, an endless desert carved by wind and time, where canyons carried old whispers and two civilizations pressed against each other like flint and steel. To the Apache, this land was not owned. It was lived, remembered, and revered. Every mesa, every dry wash, every twisted juniper held the weight of generations. Their ancestors had moved through this country with care, reading clouds like prophecy, sensing water beneath lifeless dust, knowing when the land spoke and when it warned. The bands of the mountains and the desert followed the seasons, tracking game, gathering mescal, pinon nuts, and the ripe fruit of the saguaro. Survival here required patience and respect, but to the settlers pushing west, the same land promised profit. They did not see memory or spirit, only open ground, ripe for fences, plows, and brands. Wagons rolled in, groaning beneath ambition. Cattle, seed, iron tools, and certainty followed. The Whitaker Ranch spread wide across nearly 3,000 acres of contested earth, its borders bitten into the soil by barbed wire that flashed like knives under the sun. Harlan Whitaker had built his domain with the same hard resolve that once made him successful back east. At 53, his face was weathered and unyielding, shaped by failure, fortune, and years of frontier tension. His daughter, Mae Calder, stood at the edge of the property now, where fence posts ended and the desert began. At 19, Mae carried her mother's beauty, sun-bright hair and eyes the color of sage after rain, but her spirit belonged to no one. While other ranch daughters learned manners and music, Mae rode harder than most men and shot straighter than many who mocked her for it. "You shouldn't ride so far out," Edna Graves had warned that morning, worry soft but firm. Mae had only smiled. She never listened well to rules that tried to shrink her world. The desert spoke to her in a wordless way. Something felt deep in bone and breath. Out here, beyond the weight of expectation and walls, she could finally breathe. A hawk circled high above, its cry slicing through the still air. Her father had begun pressing the subject of marriage, dropping names like Cole Ransom from the neighboring ranch or polished sons of Tucson bankers. He called it security, a good arrangement, as if Mae were another asset to trade. The thought tightened her grip on the reins. She would rather face 100 Cade's warriors than sit politely in a parlor, serving tea to a man who saw her as decoration. Miles south, beyond settler maps, Cade sat near a small fire with his grandfather, Noken, learning what remained of the old ways. At 22, Cade was already respected among his people as a tracker and a fighter. His name carried the meaning of connection, yet connection had grown scarce. "Tell me again about before," Cade said, working a strip of hide with steady hands. Noken stared into the fire. Before the whites came, the land breathed easier. Game was plentiful. Water ran clean. He paused, gesturing toward the horizon where distant smoke marked expansion. "We fought Mexicans, other tribes. Those wars had rules. This is different. They don't want to win. They want us erased." Cade's jaw set. 3 winters earlier, Bluecoats had mistaken his family's hunting camp for a war party. The memory stayed sharp. His mother's cry cut short, his father falling with his rifle still out of reach. "The young men talk of pushing back," Cade said carefully. "They say Geronimo gathers fighters." Noken was silent before answering. "Even he cannot stop a flood. We survive by choosing when to fight and when to endure. Revenge burns the bearer first." But Cade felt every broken treaty, every new fence, like a fresh wound. Retreat tasted like loss. As the sun lowered, Mae turned Ash toward home, having ridden farther than she intended, drawn by a narrow canyon she'd never seen before. Rock walls rose around her in layered color, red, white, black, history written in stone. She didn't notice the Apache scout until he stepped from behind a boulder, silent and fluid as drifting smoke. Her hand went to her rifle by instinct, but he made no move. He simply watched her, eyes dark and steady. Deer-hide leggings, a traded cotton shirt, long hair bound with red cloth. Time stretched. Mae saw not the monster described over whiskey tables, but a young man marked by loss and restraint. Cade saw not an invader, but a woman alert yet unafraid, armed but unwilling to draw. Ash shifted nervously, breaking the spell. When Mae looked again, the scout was gone, absorbed by stone and shadow. She rode home with her pulse racing, unsure whether fear or something else drove it, knowing only that the desert had changed shape around her. And far away, beneath the same sinking sun, Cade felt it too. The uneasy certainty that one moment, one crossing of paths, had already altered the course of both their worlds. The moment snapped apart when Ash, unsettled by the stranger's scent, tossed her head and sidestepped with a sharp whinny. The sound cut through the stillness, breaking whatever fragile tension had held the canyon quiet. Cade retreated at once, slipping backward and dissolving into stone and shadow, with a grace that felt unreal, as if the land itself had taken him in. By the time Mae Calder steadied her horse and looked again, he was gone. She rode home with her pulse pounding, unsure whether fear drove it, or something far more unsettling. The image stayed with her all the way back. The firm line of his shoulders, the way dusk had carved his face from light and shadow. That night at supper, Harlan Whitaker spoke grimly of trouble spreading across the southern ranges. Missing cattle, a supply wagon burned to ash. "It's getting worse," he said, slicing into his steak with clipped precision. "Wade Ransom lost 20 head last week. The Army promises more patrols, but what good are bluecoats who can't read Apache ground?" "Maybe we should try talking," Mae ventured. The clatter of her father's fork against the plate ended the thought. "Talking?" he snapped. "With people who'd scalp you as quick as breathe? Don't fill your head with foolish notions. Strength is the only language they understand." Mae swallowed her reply, her thoughts pulled back to the canyon, to dark eyes holding a depth her father refused to see. She'd grown up on stories of cruelty, of raids that left nothing standing. But what if those tales were only fragments? What if, around other fires, different stories were told? Of soldiers mistaking hunters for enemies, of treaties written in tongues never learned, of children taken in the name of order. Lying awake that night, coyotes calling beyond the walls, Mae felt the world hardening into lines, Apache and white, savage and civilized, us and them. But what if she didn't belong cleanly to either side? What if the heart ignored borders altogether? Miles away, beneath the same stars, Cade lay awake with the same questions burning through him. The white woman's face returned unbidden, not beautiful by his people's measures, yet striking all the same. Her sage-colored eyes, the way she sat her horse with ease, told him she loved the land, not just what could be taken from it. He'd been tracking game that day, not soldiers. He should have stayed hidden. Something had pushed him into the open. Curiosity, perhaps, or the same restlessness that made him doubt Noken's lessons of patience. "You're troubled," Noken said from across the fire. I saw one of them today, Cade answered quietly. A white woman. Alone. His grandfather's gaze sharpened. And? We looked at each other. Then she left. Wisdom, Noken said. On both sides. Still, Cade wondered if wisdom and fear sometimes wore the same skin. How much more land could they surrender before there was nowhere left to stand? Above them, stars surfaced one by one, indifferent witnesses that had watched over settler and Apache alike since the first fires were lit. Under their cold light, the desert breathed, and two young hearts struggled to understand a moment that had already altered them. Neither knew how far that single crossing of paths would reach, for now there was only memory, and the unsettling certainty that nothing would remain unchanged. 3 days later, the afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the sand as Mae rode out again. She told Edna Graves she was visiting the ransom place, but Ash carried her elsewhere. The land blurred past, Ocotillo clawing at the sky, purple sage releasing its sharp scent on the warm air. Sleep had barely touched her these nights, dreams filled with dark eyes and unanswered questions. When Ash stumbled on loose stone near a dry wash, Mae slid down at once, checking her carefully. The mare favored her left foreleg. Mae's chest tightened. They were miles from home, and the sun was already sinking. Easy, Ash, she murmured, running practiced hands along the leg. No break. Thank God. But strained. Walking back would take hours. Then hoofbeats sounded. Alone and exposed, Mae felt a different kind of danger creep in. Bandits and drifters could be worse than any raid. The rider who rounded the red rocks stole her breath. It was the same Apache from the canyon. Cade sat his paint pony as if horse and rider were one. And this time, he was alone. They faced each other across 20 feet of open sand. Mae's hand hovered near her rifle, but she didn't draw. There was something in him that held her still. Calm. Watchful. Not threatening. Your horse, he said at last, his English careful but clear, gesturing toward Ash. Hurt. Mae Calder blinked at the sound of his voice, lower than she expected, steady, carrying a quiet music despite the careful shaping of each word. Yeah, she said after a beat, clearing her throat. I think it's just a strain. Cade swung down from his pony in one smooth motion. Mae stiffened, but he kept his pace unhurried, hands open, movements plain to see. The same calm approach she'd watched her father's best horsemen use with nervous stock. When he was still 10 feet away, he stopped. May I look? The question hung between them like a narrow bridge. Letting him closer meant trust, and trust between their worlds was rarer than rain in August. Still, there was something in his eyes, the same sharp, thoughtful measure she'd noticed before, that made her nod. He stepped to Ash, murmuring softly in Apache. The mare's ears tipped forward, curious rather than afraid. His check was quick, practiced. Not bad, he said, straightening, but she needs rest. Cold water. He pointed northwest. Spring that way, not far. Mae knew she should refuse, mount up despite the strain and limp home. But the sun was already brushing the rocks with amber and rose. By the time she reached the ranch, night would be on her heels. Show me, she heard herself say. If her trust surprised him, he hid it. He only nodded, mounted, and set an easy pace so Mae could lead Ash on foot. The spring lay tucked among cottonwoods, a quiet pocket of green marked with signs Mae didn't know how to read. Clear water bubbled from stone, fed a shallow pool, then vanished back into the thirsty ground. While Ash drank and Mae cooled the leg, Cade built a small fire with quick, efficient motions. The silence settled comfortably, broken by leaves whispering and a mourning dove calling from somewhere unseen. "What's your name?" Mae asked at last. He considered her, then said, "Cade, and you're the Whitaker daughter." It wasn't a question. Of course he would know. The Apache watched settler families as closely as Harlan Whitaker watched his brands. "Mae," she said, offering what he already had. "Thank you." Your father would not. The truth sat between them like a third presence. "No," Mae agreed. "He wouldn't." "Then why do you ride alone?" Cade asked. "Why do you trust?" She answered without rehearsing it. "Because I'm tired of fearing what I don't understand. The stories they tell—" She searched for the right words. "They don't match what I see." "What do you see?" She met his gaze. "Someone who could have taken advantage of a woman alone and chose to help. Someone who knows how to calm a frightened horse. Someone who speaks my language better than half the cowboys on our ranch." A hint of a smile touched his mouth. "Missionaries," he said. "They came when I was young. Said we needed white words to survive in a white world. Were they right?" His expression tightened. "Words are not enough. We learn to speak, and still they take. We learn to write our names, and still the papers lie." The bitterness in his voice tasted sharp as alkali. Mae thought of the documents her father and his friends argued over, lines shifting like dunes. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. Cade studied her with eyes that seemed to hold more than one horizon. "You are not like the others." "How do you know?" she asked. He gestured to the spring, the fire, the space they shared. "Most whites look at Apache and see only fear. You look and see a man." The fire popped, sparks spiraling up as the first stars came out. Mae knew she should go. Edna Graves would be worried, her father furious. Still, something held her there, an understanding that this moment was as precious as water in a dry land. "Tell me," she said on impulse. "Tell me about your people, the truth, not what I've heard." So he did, as the stars multiplied. Cade spoke of a world Mae had never been taught to imagine, of the sunrise ceremony, when Apache girls became women under the blessing of white-painted woman, of hunts guided by bird flight and wind, of medicines drawn from plants settlers called weeds. And then he spoke of darker things, of camps struck at dawn, of bluecoats mistaking peace for threat, of children taken far away and punished for speaking their own names. He spoke of watching land that had fed his people for generations cut apart and handed to strangers, scarred by plows and fences. Cade stared into the fire as he spoke. "My father believed peace was possible," he said quietly. "He said we had to learn to live beside the whites." Cade's voice flattened. "He rode to Fort Grant under a white flag to talk treaty. They shot him before he spoke. Said they thought he was reaching for a weapon." Mae Calder's throat tightened. The flames popped, sinking lower. "Your grief won't change what happened," Cade said, not unkindly, "but the fact you feel it, that matters." They sat in silence while the fire burned down to coals. At last, Mae rose. "Ash looks better. I should go." Cade stood too. For a breath, they faced each other across the dying light, the space between them heavy with both promise and impossibility. "Will you come back?" he asked. She should have said no. She should have ridden home and forgotten the spring, the fire, him, accepted Cole Ransom or whatever man her father chose, and lived the life stitched for her. Instead, she nodded. "There's a full moon in 4 nights, Cade said. "This place is easy to find by moonlight." It was invitation and question together. Mae thought of danger, of scandal, of how impossible this already felt. When she spoke, there was only one word. Yes, he helped her mount, despite Ash's protest, his hand steady and proper at her waist. As she gathered the reins, he caught her fingers briefly. "Be careful." "Mae Calder," he added softly. "Your world and mine don't fit together well." "I know," she said, and was already thinking of the full moon. She rode home through deepening dusk, her heart keeping a rhythm she didn't recognize. Behind her, Cade watched until the last dust settled, then turned his pony toward his people's camp. Both carried the same memory: firelight on water, words spoken across a divide that shouldn't have allowed them. The stars that witnessed their meeting now watched their parting, cold and distant over a land where worlds collided and, at times, found unexpected grace. In 4 nights, the moon would rise full. Against wisdom, tradition, and the weight of history, 2 young hearts were already counting the hours. The die was cast, though neither yet understood how far it would roll. For now, there was only the promise of return, fragile as a desert bloom, stubborn as ancient stone. The full moon lifted like a silver dollar, turning the desert into light and shadow. Mae slipped out her bedroom window with practiced care, pulse racing. She'd pleaded a headache after supper and retired early while Harlan Whitaker entertained Cole Ransom and Wade Ransom below. Ash waited in the cottonwood grove behind the ranch, saddled and ready. Mae's distraction over the past 4 days hadn't gone unnoticed. Edna Graves had watched her closely, her father had commented twice. But they blamed nerves, fear stirred by talk of raids. If they only knew. Mae mounted and turned Ash toward the spring. The ride felt endless and too short at once. Landmarks passed: the lightning-split Joshua tree, the red rock shaped like praying hands, each pulling her closer to something she couldn't name, only feel. He was already there when she arrived, seated by a small fire that painted his face in warm gold. Cade rose as she approached. He'd traded his traditional dress for practical clothes, the kind a Mexican vaquero might wear. "You came," he said simply. "Did you doubt?" she asked. "I hoped," he answered. "Hope and certainty aren't the same." Mae dismounted and tethered Ash near the water. When she turned back, Cade had set a blanket across from the fire, keeping a careful distance. Respect made visible. "Tell me about your week," he said. It was an ordinary question, the kind friends asked. Nothing about this was ordinary. An Apache warrior and a rancher's daughter meeting in secret while the land edged toward war. "My father's more worried," Mae said. "The Ransom Ranch lost more cattle. Everyone's talking about Geronimo gathering fighters in the mountains. They're sending more troops from Fort Huachuca." At that, Cade's face hardened. "The young men feel it. They grow restless." "When soldiers arrive," he went on, "they remember other times troops came. It turns into a circle. We prepare to defend ourselves. You see that preparation as a threat, so you send more soldiers. We see soldiers as an attack." "And it keeps building," Mae Calder said quietly, "until someone fires first." "Someone always fires the first shot," Cade replied. "The real question is who fires the last." They fell into a thoughtful silence. The fire hissed softly. After a moment, Mae spoke again. "What about you? Your week?" A faint smile eased the lines of his face. "I thought about a woman with hair like summer grass," he said. I wondered if she would keep her word. Warmth crept up Mae's neck. "Cade, His smile faded, though his voice stayed gentle. "Knowing and feeling aren't the same thing. Hope and certainty never walk side by side." The fire cracked. Mae found herself studying him without hiding it, the strength shaped by wind and sun, eyes carrying more sorrow and understanding than his years should hold, hands capable of calming a frightened horse or drawing a bow with equal ease. "Tell me about your mother," she said suddenly. Surprise crossed his face, then softened. "Her name meant morning song," he said. "She was small, like a bird. But fierce," he added. "Especially when her family was threatened. She knew every plant in the desert, which ones healed, which ones harmed." He paused, lost in memory. Her laughter sounded like water over stone. "You speak of her in the past," Mae said gently. "3 winters ago," Cade answered. "Soldiers came to our camp. We weren't warriors, just families following the deer. But to them, Apache was Apache." His voice stayed even, but his hands curled tight. "She died protecting my little sister. They called it a mistake. A case of mistaken identity." Mae reached across the fire before she could stop herself, her fingers barely touching his clenched fist. "How do you live with it?" she asked. "With the anger?" He turned his hand, catching her fingers for a moment before letting go. "Some days I don't. Some days I want to ride with Cade's warriors who talk about driving every white man from our land. Then I remember her words. Hatred is a poison you drink, hoping someone else will die from it." "She sounds wise," Mae said softly. "She was. She would have liked you." He met Mae's eyes. "She always said judgment should come from what we see, not what we're told." They talked deep into the night, trading stories the way merchants traded goods. Mae told him about her mother, gone 5 years now, taken by a fever no doctor could name. She spoke of growing up as Harlan Whitaker's daughter, expected to be polished and useful, admired but rarely understood. Cade shared his people's stories, how coyotes stole fire for mankind, why the owl sings at night, where the stars were born. Then he spoke of young Apache men caught between old teachings and a world pressing in from every side. "My grandfather Noken says we must change to survive," he said as the moon climbed higher. "But sometimes I wonder if surviving means becoming something we're not." "Or if that's surviving at all," Mae said. After a breath, she added, "That's how I feel about marriage. Everyone says I must adapt, accept my place. But if I become what they want, silent, obedient, ornamental, will there be anything left of me?" "You?" Cade said with a hint of humor. "You could never be silent. You ask too many questions." "And you answer them," Mae shot back. "Most men, white or Apache, say questions aren't for women." "Then most men are fools," Cade said. "Questions are how we learn. My mother asked questions until her last day." He smiled. "My sister asks so many the elders pretend to sleep when they see her coming." Their laughter rang out, startling in the desert quiet. In those stolen hours, the weight of their worlds slipped away. They were simply 2 young people finding something unexpected, speaking truths they shared with no one else. As the moon began to sink, reality returned like a chill wind. Mae knew she had to go, back before the ranch stirred. Still, something held her there. "I wish," she began and stopped. She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "What do you wish?" Cade asked quietly. "I wish we'd met in another world," Mae Calder said at last. "One where names like Apache and White didn't matter. Where we could—" Her voice faded, the weight of impossibility closing around the rest. Cade was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, held tight by restraint. "In the stories my people tell, there are other worlds. Places where the dead walk again, where enemies become friends, where what seems impossible finds a way." He looked into the dying fire. "Maybe somewhere, in one of those worlds, a man like me and a woman like you." He didn't finish. Mae understood anyway. The fire had collapsed into embers, and the first pale line of dawn touched the eastern sky. As she prepared to mount Ash, she asked, "When?" "The new moon," Cade said. "Darker, safer." She nodded, already counting the days. 2 weeks felt like a lifetime. As she turned away, he spoke her name softly. "Mae, be careful. Men are growing suspicious, on both sides." "They won't find out," she said, with more confidence than she felt. But riding home through the thinning night, Mae wondered how long secrecy could hold. Edna Graves had already noticed her distraction. Harlan Whitaker had begun talking openly about finalizing her engagement to Cole Ransom. The space for stolen moments was shrinking, like waterholes in drought. Behind her, Cade watched until she vanished into stone and shadow. Then he turned his pony back toward his people's camp, carrying with him the scent of her hair, the echo of her laughter, and the dangerous warmth of feelings that deepened with every meeting. The world was hardening its lines. Soldiers and warriors, settlers and Apache, civilization and wilderness, everyone choosing sides in a struggle that felt as certain as sunrise. Yet at that hidden spring, 2 hearts had discovered another truth, that beneath names, fear, and old hatred, people were still people, capable of reaching across even the widest divide. It was a perilous truth in a land ruled by absolutes. Still, as night gave way to morning, neither Mae nor Cade could bring themselves to regret it. Some lessons they were learning were worth the risk. The grandfather clock in Harlan Whitaker's study struck 8 as Mae sat opposite her father, hands folded tight in her lap to hide their trembling. Beside him, Cole Ransom filled the leather chair with the confidence of a man who believed he already owned everything in the room, including her. "It's time we make this official," Harlan said, pouring whiskey for himself and Cole. None was offered to Mae. Women didn't drink whiskey in Harlan Whitaker's world. "The engagement will be announced at the harvest dance, wedding by Christmas." Mae's throat tightened. "Father, You'll have the finest wedding in the territory," Cole cut in smoothly. His pale eyes rested on her with possession, not warmth. At 28, he already carried the heaviness of his father, his hands soft despite claims of hard ranch work. "My mother's planning everything. All you need to do is look pretty." "How fortunate," Mae said evenly. The storm raging inside her kept carefully hidden. "To have my life arranged so completely without my say." Harlan's gaze sharpened. "Mind your tongue." "Samuel is offering you a good life," he continued. "The Ransom Ranch joins with ours. We'll control the largest spread in the territory." Mae looked at them both. "Is that all I am? A property merger?" Cole laughed, the sound like a rusted hinge. "I like spirit in a woman, long as she knows when to rein it in." He reached out and patted her hand. Mae forced herself not to pull away. His touch was damp, claiming. "I need time," she said quickly. "This is all very sudden." "Sudden?" Harlan's voice hardened. "Girl, I've been planning this for 2 years." Harlan Whitaker's voice was hard with certainty. "Cole Ransom here has been patient, waiting for you to grow out of your foolish notions. But with all this Apache trouble, we need to secure our position. United, our families can withstand whatever's coming." "The savages are getting bolder," Cole Ransom added, his jaw tightening. "Yesterday we found Apache sign less than 5 miles from your boundary." "When we're married," he went on, "you'll move to my ranch. It's safer there. I've hired extra guns." "Guns," Mae Calder repeated dully. "Yes, that should fix everything." Cole's eyes narrowed at her tone, but Harlan cut in. "Mae's been sheltered," he said, shooting her a warning look. "She doesn't grasp the realities we're facing, but she's a good girl. She'll do her duty." Duty. The word settled in Mae's stomach like a stone. She thought of her mother. Married at 17 to a man she barely knew, spending her life managing a household for a husband who saw her as an investment, not a partner. Was this to be Mae's life, too? "May I be excused?" she asked quietly. Harlan waved a dismissive hand. "Women's nerves. Yes, go compose yourself. Cole and I have business to discuss." Mae fled to her room. Her control held only until the door shut behind her. She leaned against it, chest heaving, the sobs trapped tight in her throat. Outside her window, the moon was thinning, only a pale sliver left in the sky. 5 nights until it vanished completely. 5 nights until she could see Cade again. But what would she tell him? That while they shared stories and dreams beside a fire, her life was being bartered away? That in 3 months she would be Mrs. Cole Ransom, locked inside a fine house that would feel like a cage no matter how many rooms it held? A soft knock cut through her spiraling thoughts. Edna Graves entered without waiting, her lined face drawn with concern. "I heard," Edna said simply. "The whole house did. Cole Ransom's voice carries like a bull." "What am I going to do?" Mae whispered. Edna sat beside her on the bed. "I've known you since the day you were born," she said gently. "I watched you grow from a wild little thing who'd rather climb trees than wear dresses into a young woman with more fire than this territory knows how to handle. And I've watched that fire dim these past months." Mae stiffened. "Did Edna know? You think I don't notice when you slip out at night?" Edna continued softly. "The mesquite thorns in your skirt, the red clay on your boots that only comes from the canyons. I may be old, child, but I'm not blind. Edna, Hush." She lifted a hand. "I don't need to know where you go or who you meet. That's your business. But I know the look of a girl whose heart's already chosen. And it's not Cole Ransom's name it's calling." Tears spilled down Mae's cheeks. "It doesn't matter. Father's decided. Cole's decided. What I want means nothing." "Your mother said the same thing once," Edna said quietly. "The night before her wedding, she cried in my arms and told me she'd rather die than marry a man she didn't love." "But she did," Mae said bitterly. "She did her duty, and it killed her." "The doctor called it fever," Edna replied, "but I saw her fading long before that. I saw how she stared out windows like a trapped bird, how she smiled without it ever reaching her eyes. That's what duty did to her." Edna sighed. "These are dangerous times. Your father isn't wrong about that. Trouble with the Apache grows every day. A woman alone, without protection." "The Apache aren't the monsters everyone claims," Mae said before she could stop herself. Edna's eyes sharpened. "You sound very certain of that." Mae looked away. "I just think if people tried to understand each other instead of reaching for guns—" "Understanding is a luxury when people are dying on both sides," Edna said, standing and smoothing her apron. "But I'll tell you something your mother once told me." She paused at the door. She said the only choice that matters is the one you can live with, not the one that pleases others, not the safest or the most sensible, the one you can face in the mirror each morning without your soul turning to dust. Then, more softly, "Cole Ransom's staying for supper. Your father expects you to join them. Wear the blue dress. It brings out your eyes." Edna hesitated. "And, Mae, whatever you're thinking of doing, be careful. This world is cruel to women who choose their own paths." She left Mae alone, the room heavy with silence and the weight of a decision that could no longer be avoided. Mae Calder went to the window. Somewhere beyond the ranch fences and the clean, ordered lines of barbed wire, Cade was living his life. Did he think of her as often as she thought of him? Did he feel the same fierce pull, like thirst drawing a body toward water in the desert? She dressed without thought in the blue dress Edna Graves had laid out, pinned her hair, brushed color into her cheeks. The woman in the mirror looked unfamiliar, proper, composed, ready to accept what was expected. Yet behind that careful calm, rebellion coiled like a sleeping rattlesnake. At supper, Cole Ransom held court, talking cattle prices and Apache raids. He sat too close, touched her arm too often, looked at her as if ownership were already settled. Harlan Whitaker glowed with approval whenever Mae answered Cole's thick compliments with polite restraint. "Once we're married," Cole said, hacking at his steak, "you'll give up those riding trips. Too dangerous for a wife. My mother will see you taught proper household order." "How generous," Mae murmured, picturing a woman who weighed flour as carefully as words, who ran her home like a campaign. "And of course," Cole went on, "you'll have duties soon enough. I expect a son within the year. Several, if God's willing. We need to secure the line." The potato turned to ash in Mae's mouth. She swallowed, smiled, played the part, while everything inside her screamed. When Cole finally left, full of whiskey and plans, her father turned to her with satisfaction. "You did well tonight. See how simple it is when you apply yourself. Cole's a good man. He'll take care of you." "Like he takes care of his cattle?" Mae asked softly. "Fed, watered, bred on schedule?" Harlan's face darkened. "You'll mind that tongue when you're his wife. A man has a right to obedience in his own house." "Of course," Mae said. "How foolish of me to forget." "Or take to my force." She climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, her father called out, "The engagement party will be something special. Everyone of consequence will attend. We'll show these Apache sympathizers what real Americans can do when we stand together." Mae didn't undress. She sat by the window and watched the stars appear one by one. Somewhere under that same sky, Apache mothers sang children to sleep. Young men weighed old ways against a pressing future. One particular warrior might be looking up at the same light. The blue dress felt like chains. Cole's touch lingered on her skin like a brand. The future stretched ahead, mapped in suffocating detail. Marriage, children, a life spent serving a man who saw her as property to be managed. But there were 5 nights left until the new moon. 5 nights to choose a path that would echo for the rest of her life. 5 nights to decide if she had the courage to break free, knowing the cost could be everything she knew. The stars offered no answers, only their cold, ancient light. Still, in that vast darkness, a resolve stirred in Mae, hard and bright as the stars themselves. She would not step quietly into the cage built for her. Not without a fight. The new moon plunged the desert into complete darkness, forcing Mae to trust Ash's instincts more than her own eyes. She waited until the house slept, until her father's snores rolled through the halls and the last lamp died. Then she rode for the spring, heart pounding, knowing this meeting would not be like the others. She found Cade by the sound of his low humming, a song he'd mentioned once, one his mother used to sing. There was no fire tonight. Darkness was their only shield. As her eyes adjusted, she made out his shape against the paler sky. "Mae," he said, her name both greeting and question. She dismounted on unsteady legs, tied Ash with shaking hands. When she faced him, the words she'd practiced scattered like startled quail. "What troubles you?" he asked. He didn't step closer, yet she felt his concern across the dark. "You shine with sorrow, like the moon with borrowed light. The poetry of it, so at odds with how the world painted Apache men, broke something open." Tears came, hot and unstoppable. "They're selling me," she choked, "like cattle at auction. My father and Cole Ransom have decided. Engaged next month, married by Christmas." She heard his sharp breath, saw his silhouette go rigid. For a long moment, the desert held only her muffled sobs. This ransom, Cade said at last, his voice tightly held. Do you care for him? A bitter laugh tore from Mae Calder. I care for him the way a rabbit cares for a snare. He looks at me and sees acres to add to his spread, sons to carry his name. Nothing else. And your father allows this? Allows it? Mae shook her head. He planned it. Says it's for my own good, for protection against... She faltered, then finished quietly. Against your people. The silence that followed was dense, weighted with truth neither could deny. Then Cade moved, closing the space until starlight revealed his face. The ache in his eyes mirrored her own. Among my people, he said softly, a woman chooses her husband. Family may advise, may guide, but the choice is hers. To force a woman into marriage is to invite darkness into the home. How civilized, Mae said, bitter irony cutting her voice. And yet we're told you're the savages. Mae, he whispered, look at me. She lifted her gaze. The careful distance he'd kept was gone. In its place burned something fierce and tender, dangerous as wildfire. I have tried to be wise, he said, rough now. I've told myself you are white and I am Apache, that our worlds are at war, that caring for you is like reaching into flame. But wisdom deserts me when you are near. My heart speaks louder than caution. He pressed on, words spilling. Each time we meet, I swear it will be the last. Each time I ride away, I promise to forget. Yet you thread yourself through my thoughts like silver through dark cloth. I see your face in morning clouds. I hear your laughter in running water. He stopped, searching. Then speak your heart, Mae whispered. In any language. He cupped her face, hands trembling, thumbs brushing her tears. I love you, he said simply. Apache, English, and the language beyond words. I love you the way the desert loves rain, desperately, against all reason. Her sob broke free, joy tangled with anguish. And I love you. God help me, I do. I've tried not to, tried to be dutiful, tried to accept what's been decided, but I can't marry Cole Ransom when my heart belongs to you. I can't. The confession hung between them. Then Cade's control shattered. He pulled her close. Mae went willingly, pressing her face to his chest, breathing sage and smoke and the unmistakable truth of him. I will not let them take you, he vowed into her hair. The stars hear me. The night bears witness. No one will take you from me. Mae drew back. How? My father will never agree. Your people, West, he said at once. California. Places where Apache and white matter less than gold in a stream, where we can be simply Cade and Mae. Leave everything? Her breath caught, fear and exhilaration racing together. What is everything? He asked. Land that owns us more than we own it. Families that would cage us with expectations. Traditions that call our love wrong. His hands tightened on her shoulders. I would trade it all for one honest lifetime with you. She felt herself at the edge. One step back to a safe, suffocating life. One step forward into the unknown with love as her only certainty. When? She asked, and felt him understand her choice. 3 nights from now, he said. When the moon begins to grow, I'll have horses and supplies. Meet me here when the moon rises. We travel by night, rest by day. I know paths the soldiers forgot, ways through mountains your people never mapped. And your family, your grandfather. Pain flickered. He will understand. In time. He taught me that sometimes the heart must lead where the mind fears to go. But you must be sure, Cade said gently. Once we leave, there is no return. Your father will not forgive. My people will call me lost. We will have only each other. Only each other, Mae repeated, and freedom and love, and a life we choose. She touched his face. I've never been more certain. He caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. Then we will write our own story. Not Apache, not white, just two people who refused to be divided. They held each other in the dark, whispering of practical things, what to bring, where to meet, how to travel, while the desert listened, and a future took its first irrevocable shape. Beneath all the planning ran a current of desperate joy. Against every odd stacked against them, they would try. Against all good sense, they would run. "I should go," Mae Calder said at last, though leaving felt like tearing something vital from her chest. 3 nights, Cade reminded her. "When the moon shows its first thin edge, I'll be here." He kissed her then. Their first kiss, under stars that burned like witnesses to a vow that defied 2 worlds. It was both gentle and fierce, tasting of tears and resolve, of a love that refused to bend before hatred. When they pulled apart, Mae felt changed. The girl who had ridden out to the spring was gone. In her place stood a woman who had chosen love over safety, freedom over duty, an uncertain road over a certain cage. "Be careful," Cade urged as she mounted Ash. "If anyone suspects, they won't," Mae said. "I'll play the obedient daughter for 3 more days. Let them plan their engagement party. Let Cole Ransom dream of sons." Her voice steadied. "In 3 nights, Mae Calder disappears. Someone new is born." "And who will you be then?" Cade asked. She smiled in the dark. "Yours. Simply. Completely." She rode home through star-heavy darkness, Cade's vow echoing in her ears. "No one will take you from me." The stars had heard. The night had borne witness. In 3 days, they would test whether love could truly stand against everything raised to crush it. Behind her, Cade remained long after the sound of hoofbeats faded. He had sworn words that would not loosen with time, made promises that would reshape 2 lives. The warrior in him knew the dangers. The man in him did not care. 3 nights. Then their real story would begin. The air grew tight as smoke from a distant wildfire. For 2 days, Mae watched a storm gather, not in the sky, but in the hearts of men bent toward violence. It began with missing cattle. Wade Ransom burst into the dining room at breakfast, face red with fury. 20 head gone. Apache sign all over the waterhole. This is war. Harlan Whitaker's jaw hardened. "You're certain it was Apache?" "Who else?" Wade snapped. "Who knows the land well enough to move cattle without us hearing?" He slammed his fist on the table, rattling the china. "I've sent word to Fort Huachuca. Colonel Briggs promises troops by week's end." Mae kept her eyes on her plate, her stomach twisting. Cade had warned her. His people were being blamed for raids they hadn't made. Mexican bandits had learned to leave false sign, knowing Apache would pay the price. "Perhaps we should verify," she began. "Verify?" Wade rounded on her. "What's to verify? Savages steal. That's their nature." His gaze turned cold. "Once you're married to Cole, you'll learn to keep your sympathies in check." By afternoon, the news worsened. A supply wagon burned on the Tucson road. The driver lived, claiming Apache attacked, though he admitted he'd seen no faces in the dark. By evening, ranchers gathered at the Whitaker spread, cleaning rifles and talking retribution. Mae watched from her window as neighbors transformed into a mob. Men who tipped their hats on Sundays, who helped raise barns and deliver calves. Now their faces were twisted with rage, their voices carrying promises of blood across the desert. Among them, Cole Ransom stood tall, savoring his part as the wronged man. "We hit them hard and fast," he declared. "Find their camp. Burn it out. It's the only language these heathens understand." "What about women and children?" one rancher asked, uneasy. "Nits make lice," Cole said coldly. "Better to end the problem completely." Mae's hand flew to her mouth. Tomorrow night she was meant to meet Cade. But if these men rode out for vengeance, she found Edna Graves in the kitchen, preserving peaches with steady, mechanical care. "They're going to attack the Apache camps," Mae said without preface. Edna didn't look up. "Men do foolish things when they're afraid." "Foolish," Mae whispered fiercely. "They're talking about killing children." "Keep your voice down," Edna warned, glancing towards the door. "Your father has enough trouble without his daughter taking up Apache causes." "Someone has to stop this," Mae insisted, "before it's too late." Edna set her knife down carefully. "And how would you have us do that? Stand between angry men with guns and their idea of justice?" She shook her head. "That's how you join the dead, not how you save them." That night, Mae Calder lay awake, listening to the voices rising from below. More men arrived as word spread. She heard Colonel Briggs himself, promising military backing for what he called civilian defense. The die was being cast for a massacre. By the next day, the ranch had turned into an armed camp. Men came and went carrying ammunition, unrolling maps, arguing over which Apache band was guilty. Mae tried once more to reason with her father. "What if it wasn't Apache?" she asked as Harlan Whitaker cleaned his rifle. "What if the real thieves want us to blame them?" "Enough." He slammed the rifle butt onto the floor. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this Apache sympathy ends now. They're our enemies, Mae. They'd kill you without a second thought." "That's not true." His hand struck her face, sharp and sudden. The first time he had ever hit her. Mae staggered back, palm pressed to her burning cheek, tears spilling before she could stop them. "I'm sorry," Harlan said gruffly, though his eyes stayed hard. "But you need to understand, this is war. Pick a side or be crushed between them." Mae fled to her room, her cheek throbbing. From the window she saw dust rising in the distance, more riders arriving. The Apache would have no warning. They would be in their camps, living their lives, while death gathered like a storm. She had to warn Cade. But the ranch was crawling with armed men, every exit watched. Cole Ransom himself patrolled the grounds, suspicious of everything. As afternoon slid toward evening, the war party formed in earnest. Nearly 50 men, rifles and pistols gleaming, fury feeding on itself. Cole addressed them from horseback. "We ride at midnight, hit them in the dark before dawn, when they least expect it. The army won't interfere. Colonel Briggs assures me they'll be slow to respond." Cheers erupted. Whiskey bottles passed from hand to hand. "Which camp?" someone shouted. "Scouts say a band at Coyote Springs, 15 miles northeast. Mostly families," Cole answered. "Not many warriors, easy." Mae's blood turned to ice. Coyote Springs. She knew it. Nokon had camped there. Sweet water, cottonwood shade, Apache families, elders, women, children. She couldn't wait for tomorrow night. By then, it would be too late. As darkness fell, she made her choice. The men were drinking heavily now, their attention fixed on weapons and bravado. Mae dressed in her darkest riding clothes, pinned her hair tight, and studied the movement below. There, a brief gap between the sentries Cole had posted. She turned and nearly stopped breathing. Edna Graves stood in the doorway. "Going somewhere?" I couldn't sleep." Edna studied her, then spoke quietly. "The wash house. There's a loose board in the back wall, big enough for someone your size. The path behind it leads to the old cottonwood grove." "Edna, I see nothing. I know nothing," Edna said firmly. "If you're not back by dawn, I'll raise the alarm myself. Whatever you're doing, child, be quick." Mae hugged her fiercely, then slipped into the night. The wash house was dark, heavy with the scent of lye soap. She found the loose board, forced herself through, tearing her shirt on a nail. Beyond the grove, Ash waited, saddled. Not a miracle, Edna had prepared. Mae mounted and rode hard, choosing the dangerous cut through Devil's Canyon to save time. The moon was only a sliver, just enough light to guide her. Behind her, she heard the camp. Shouts, laughter, the metallic click of weapons being readied. She had to reach Coyote Springs first. She had to warn them, even if it exposed everything, even if it meant never seeing Cade again. She would not let his people be slaughtered while she hid in safety. The desert tore past in shadow and starlight as Mae drove Ash harder than she ever had. Time was slipping away. Soon, 50 armed men would thunder through this same darkness, carrying death with them. A coyote's howl rose in the distance. Mae whispered a prayer that it was an omen, the trickster spirit Cade had told her about, the one who sometimes aided those reckless enough to defy fate. She had to succeed. The other outcome, Cade dead, his grandfather, his sister, the families who wanted only to live in peace, was unthinkable. The stars burned overhead, cold witnesses to a race between warning and slaughter. Mae Calder rode on, her heart keeping time with Ash's pounding hooves, knowing that by dawn, everything would be changed. Behind her, unaware of her flight, the war party finished its preparations. Vengeance burned hot in their bellies, fed by whiskey and certainty. They would ride at midnight and deliver civilization's answer to the Apache, unless one desperate woman could outrun hatred itself. The camp at Coyote Springs slept beneath the stars when Mae thundered in, Ash lathered and shaking with exhaustion. Dogs erupted into barking. In seconds, figures spilled from wiki-ups, weapons raised. "Stop!" Mae shouted in English, then grasped for the Apache words Cade had taught her. "Dagote, friend, I need Cade." A rifle barrel pressed cold against her neck. She froze, hands lifted, fierce faces closing in from the dark. Then a familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Mae." Cade pushed through the circle, disbelief written across his face. "They're coming," she gasped, tumbling from Ash and seizing his arms. 50 men, armed, riding at midnight. They mean to kill everyone. You have to run." Rapid Apache words flew. Nokan stepped forward, his weathered face grave in the firelight. "How long?" he asked in careful English. Mae glanced at the stars, counting with shaking breath. 2 hours, maybe less. They were drinking, working themselves up. Cole Ransom leads them. "The one who would claim you," Cade said, his voice deadly calm. "Yes," Mae whispered. "He says families are easy targets. That children—" She couldn't finish. Nokan barked orders. The camp burst into motion, women scooping up children, men grabbing weapons, everyone moving with the practiced efficiency of people who had fled before. "You shouldn't have come," Cade said, cupping her face. "Now you can never go back." "I couldn't let them slaughter your family while I stayed safe," Mae said, gripping his hands. "I chose." A woman's scream split the night. On the southern ridge, torches flared like angry stars. The war party had ridden faster than expected, driven by bloodlust and whiskey. "Too late," someone said in Apache. "They've cut off the mountain trails." Nokan's voice rang with command. "Warriors to the south ridge. Buy time. Women and children to the canyon. Go!" The camp scattered like quail before a hawk. Cade shoved a rifle into Mae's hands. "Can you shoot?" "Yes." "Then stay close." He turned to go. Mae caught his arm. "Together," she said fiercely. "Whatever comes, together." The first shots cracked across the desert, muzzle flashes lighting the dark like deadly fireflies. Over the chaos, Cole Ransom's voice boomed. "No prisoners. Clean them out." Cade's warriors took cover behind rock and timber, returning fire with lethal precision. But they were outnumbered 3-1. Step by step they gave ground, shielding the fleeing Apache families. Mae found herself beside Cade behind an overturned wagon, firing at shadows and flashes. Her father had taught her to shoot rabbits and coyotes. She forced herself not to think that some shapes had once tipped their hats to her on Sundays. "Mae Calder," Cole shouted across the fight. "I know you're here. I saw your horse. Come out now and I might spare your Apache lover." Cade's jaw hardened. "He uses you as bait. Let him try." Mae sighted down her rifle, found Cole's distinctive silhouette against the fire, and tightened her finger. Cade touched her wrist. "Kill him, and they'll hunt us forever. Wound him. Perhaps—" She adjusted, breathed out, squeezed. Cole's howl tore the night as the bullet took his shoulder. Satisfaction and horror tangled in her chest. The fight surged on. The Apache held with desperate courage, but numbers told. Warriors fell. Smoke and screams filled the air, copper blood mixed with gunpowder. "The families?" Mae asked during a lull. "Safe in the canyon," Cade said, "but we're trapped here." His ammunition was running low. The circle tightened. Then Mae heard a voice closer than she expected. "Mae, I know you're here. This madness ends now." She peered around the wagon. Harlan Whitaker stood 20 yards away, rifle lowered, firelight carving his face into rage and anguish. "Come home," Harlan Whitaker called, his voice raw. "Whatever spell they've put on you, we can break it. You're my daughter." "Was I your daughter when you struck me?" Mae Calder shouted back. "When you sold me to Cole Ransom like cattle?" "I was trying to protect you," he said hoarsely, "to give you a good life. By forcing me into a marriage I never chose? By standing aside while these men slaughter innocents?" "They're Apache," he said, pain breaking through. "They're the enemy. They're people." Mae stepped out from cover, making herself visible. "Families, father. Children who did nothing but be born to the wrong tribe." "Mae, get down," Cade hissed, but she shook him off. "Look at me," she called. "Really look. I love him. Cade, grandson of peace seekers, a son of warriors. I love him the way Mother was never allowed to love you, the way you never let her love anyone. And if you have any love left for me, you'll stop this." For a heartbeat, the battlefield stilled. Father and daughter faced each other across smoke and bodies, 20 yards and a lifetime apart. Then Cole Ransom, bleeding but unbroken, roared from the ridge. "Enough talk! She's gone savage! Kill them all!" Gunfire exploded again. Mae dove back behind the wagon as rounds screamed past. Yet something had shifted. Several ranchers hesitated, doubt creeping into their movements. Harlan stood frozen, torn between worlds. Cade pointed toward a narrow break in the rocks. While confusion spread, Cade's warriors fell back in a fighting retreat, guarding the escape. Mae and Cade moved together, covering one another, their bodies aligned as if they had trained side by side for years. A bullet grazed Mae's arm, spinning her. Cade caught her, half dragging her toward the canyon. Behind them, Cole tried to rally a final charge. Then Harlan did the unthinkable. He fired straight into the air. "Enough!" he thundered. "The women and children are gone. We've made our point." "Like hell," Cole snarled. "They all die." "I said enough." Harlan swung his rifle toward Cole. "You want Apache warriors, fine, but you won't use my daughter to justify a massacre. Any man who follows them into that canyon answers to me." The ranchers faltered, caught between leaders. In that moment, the last Apache fighters slipped into the darkness. Mae glanced back once, meeting her father's eyes through firelight and smoke. He had chosen his own form of love, letting her go rather than watching her die. "Thank you," she mouthed, though he likely couldn't see. Cade pulled her into the canyon's shelter. They ran through twisting passages worn smooth by centuries of feet. Behind them came shouts and arguments, Cole demanding pursuit, Harlan holding firm, the coalition cracking apart. On the far side of the ridge, Apache families gathered. Women keened over fallen warriors carried in by survivors. Children clutched at skirts, eyes wide with terror. Survival's cost was written in blood and tears. Noken found them in the crowd, his ancient face lined with fresh grief. "My grandson lives," he said quietly. That is enough for an old man's heart. His gaze settled on Mae, her torn clothes, bleeding arm, the rifle still in her hands. "You are Apache now, by choice and by blood spilled. But this is only the beginning. They will come again." "Then we run," Cade said. "West, as we planned. Only sooner." "With what?" Mae asked, gesturing at the shattered camp. "These families have lost everything." "Not everything," Noken replied. "They live, and where there is life, there is hope." He studied them both. "Take horses, take supplies. Go now, while the white men argue. Draw pursuit away from us." He gripped Cade's shoulder. "This is my blessing, and my command. Live free. Show that love can bloom even on scorched earth." They left within the hour, 2 horses burdened with what could be spared. Mae looked back once at the flames staining the sky over Coyote Springs. Everything she had known, home, past, even her name, was ash. "Regrets?" Cade asked softly. She thought of her father's final choice, of Edna Graves, who had known and helped, of a life that might have been safe but never free. "No," she said, turning towards the western stars. "Only sorrow for what had to be lost so we could find our way." They rode into the desert night, 2 fugitives bound by love and blood, leaving behind a world that had no place for them. Ahead waited uncertainty, hardship, and pursuit. But they rode on together. They faced it side by side, and that truth changed everything. The same stars that had once borne witness to Cade's vow now watched them ride toward an uncertain dawn. Behind them, smoke still lifted from the battlefield, carrying prayers of the living and the silence of the dead into an indifferent sky. For 3 relentless days they rode, stopping only when the horses could no longer move. The desert was both adversary and ally. Its cruelty tore at their bodies, yet its shifting sands and broken washes erased their trail. Mae Calder learned quickly how to sleep in the saddle, how to read water in the flight of birds, how to sense danger in the slightest curl of dust on the horizon. On the 4th morning, cresting a jagged ridge, they saw them. Riders spread below in a wide line, sweeping the canyons with practiced intent. Cole Ransom's men, or perhaps bluecoats, the pursuit they had always known would come. "This way," Cade whispered, urging their exhausted horses down a narrow deer trail. The animals faltered. Hooves slipped, stones clattered into the gorge. A shout rang out. The riders turned as one. They abandoned the horses and ran on foot, scrambling up the opposite ridge. Mae's arm burned where the bullet had grazed her, but she didn't slow. Hoofbeats thundered behind them. The ridge ended abruptly, 50 feet straight down into broken stone. Trapped. "Jump," Cade said, gripping her hand. "We'll die," she breathed. "Maybe," he answered, "but we'll die free." The first riders appeared, Cole Ransom at their head, his wounded shoulder bound, his face twisted with rage. "Nowhere left to run," he snarled. "Step away from her, savage, and I'll make it quick." "She chose her path," Cade said calmly, "as I chose mine." More riders arrived, forming a half-circle. Among them stood Harlan Whitaker, hollow-eyed from sleepless nights. "Mae," he called, voice breaking. "Please, it's not too late. Come home." "I don't have a home there," Mae said, moving closer to Cade, their fingers locking together. "You made sure of that when you tried to sell me." I was trying to protect you, Harlan pleaded. Look at you now, hunted, disgraced, living like an animal. My mother would understand, Mae said, her voice steady. She knew what it cost to love against the world. Enough, Cole snapped, raising his rifle. She's ruined. Better dead than... The shot cracked like thunder. Cole staggered, shock frozen on his face, a dark bloom spreading across his chest. He fell from his saddle into the dust. The smoking gun was in Harlan Whitaker's hand. Anyone else want to murder my daughter? He said quietly. The riders shifted, unease rippling through them. Without Cole's venom driving them, the madness of the hunt stood naked. These were ranchers, fathers, husbands, not executioners. She's with an Apache, one man muttered. She's with the man she chose, Harlan replied. His shoulders sagged. My wife tried to tell me before she died. Said I was building Mae a cage like the one that broke her spirit. Said love was the only thing worth choosing, even if it costs everything. He dismounted and walked toward them, stopping well short. His gaze settled on Cade. You'll protect her. With my life. You'll cherish her. As the desert cherishes rain, Harlan reached into his coat and tossed Mae a small leather pouch. Your mother's jewelry. Sell it in California. Start again. His voice softened. Be happy. Be free. Be everything she never got to be. Tears cut clean lines down Mae's face. I have to go now, she said, before I remember what I'm supposed to be. The moment shattered as new riders crested the ridge. Bluecoats bright in the morning light, Colonel Briggs at their head. Stand down, Whitaker, the colonel barked. These fugitives are wanted for murder and insurrection. They're coming with me, Briggs added. Over my dead body, Harlan growled. The soldiers fanned out. Mae and Cade backed toward the cliff's edge. Below them the rocks glowed gold and shadow in the rising sun. Somewhere above, an eagle cried, riding the thermals far beyond human hate. Together, Mae whispered. Always, Cade answered. Hand in hand, they turned to face the drop. Hands clasped, hearts steady. It was better to choose their own ending than let the world decide it for them. Stop, Colonel Briggs shouted. Take them alive! The soldiers surged forward, but the desert answered first. Recent rains had softened the ridge, and under the weight of hooves and men, the edge gave way. Rock cracked, horses screamed, dust swallowed everything. In the chaos, Cade didn't pull Mae Calder over the cliff. He dragged her sideways along it, finding a razor-thin ledge hidden from above. They flattened themselves against the stone, barely daring to breathe as shouts echoed overhead. They jumped, someone yelled. Get ropes! Search below! For hours they clung there, muscles trembling, Mae's wounded arm burning with every heartbeat. She endured it by leaning into Cade's presence, solid, unyielding, alive. By late afternoon, the voices faded. The soldiers searched the gorge below for bodies that were never there. When full darkness finally settled, Cade guided her down the rock face. At the bottom, sheltered among massive boulders, they found their miracle. The horses broke free, Cade said quietly. Your father, he let them go. Mae swallowed hard. He chose love at the end. Too late for himself, Cade said, but not for us. They rode through the night, then another. And another. The pursuit thinned, lost among false trails and endless desert. On the 7th day, they crossed into California territory. In a small mission town, Mae traded her mother's brooch for supplies and safe passage farther west. The priest who married them asked no questions of the sun-burned white woman and the Apache man who spoke their vows in 2 languages, hands bound, eyes steady. They found work on a coastal ranch where strength mattered more than skin. Mae learned to tend gardens in soil untouched by iron and old grudges. Cade gentled horses with hands that had once drawn a warrior's bow. Some mornings Mae woke to ocean fog and marveled at how love had carried them, from desert to sea, from war to quiet, from who they had been raised to be to who they had chosen to become. Their children grew up speaking English, Apache, and Spanish. They learned their father's stories of Coyote and their mother's tales of distant myths. They understood early that home was not land or blood, but the people who stayed. Years later, a letter reached them through traders and passing hands. Edna Graves's careful script told of Harlan Whitaker's death. Peaceful in his sleep, Mae's name on his lips. He had never remarried. He had given the ranch to become a school, a place where Apache and white children might learn side by side. He found his own freedom, the letter said. Different from yours, but freedom all the same. Mae stood one evening at a high desert overlook, remembering the cliff where they had nearly chosen death over separation. Cade's arms circled her from behind, still strong, still certain. "Regrets?" he asked softly, as he once had. "Never," she answered, as she always did. "We wrote our own story." The sun sank into the western sea, painting the sky in colors that belonged to no flag, no nation. Above them, stars emerged, those same witnesses that had once heard a warrior's vow. "No one will take you from me." Cade had kept that promise through fire and flight, through hunters and hardship, through the long passage from who they were to who they became. Love proved stronger than the forces that tried to divide them. They walked back to their home. Simple, earned, built by their own hands on land claimed by no tradition but the one they made together. Behind them, the ocean sang its ancient song, welcoming all who dared to cross deep waters. In the end, they learned this. Love was not about the world accepting your choice. It was about choosing each other again and again, until that choice became as natural as breathing, as necessary as water in the desert, as enduring as the stars that witnessed every promise, every loss, every hard-won triumph of two hearts that refused to be divided. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.